Picture the late 1920s for a moment. Radios were becoming household staples. Cars were reshaping cities. Factories were more productive than ever, and a sense of momentum hung in the air. People felt like they were living in a brand new age, and in many ways they were. The United States had come out of World War I wealthier, more industrialized, and more confident than any nation before it. Productivity was rising. Corporate profits looked strong, and new financial products made it easier than ever for ordinary people to participate in markets that once felt reserved for the elite. This is usually where the story gets simplified. We're told a 1929 crash happened because of greed, speculation, and people borrowing too much to buy stocks. All of that is true, but it's also incomplete. There was a quieter warning circulating at the time, one that didn't sound dramatic, didn't make headlines, and didn't feel urgent. And because it didn't feel urgent, most people ignored it. That warning wasn't the market is about to crash. It was something more subtle. The economic system was becoming increasingly dependent on confidence, continuing uninterrupted. Not confidence in one company or one sector, but confidence as a structure. Confidence that credit would always roll over. Confidence that prices would always be justified by future growth. Confidence that the system itself was stable enough to absorb shocks without changing behavior. In the 1920s, this confidence wasn't irrational. It was grounded in real developments. Mass production lowered costs. Electrification increased output. Consumer credit allowed households to buy cars and appliances that genuinely improved their lives. Financial markets expanded participation, making ownership feel democratic rather than exclusive. From the inside, it felt like progress doing what progress was supposed to do. But incentives matter. Banks were rewarded for lending. Brokers were rewarded for volume. Investors were rewarded not for patience, but for staying in the game. Margin loans made it possible to control large positions with relatively little cash, which worked beautifully as long as prices moved up or even sideways. And when everyone's incentives align around optimism, pessimism starts to look not just wrong, but irresponsible. Here's the part that often gets overlooked. Some economists and market observers at the time weren't warning about prices being too high in a vacuum. They were concerned about fragility, about how small disruptions could cascade when leverage, interconnected balance sheets, and psychological momentum all move in the same direction. The system didn't need a dramatic external shock. It just needed confidence to wobble. And when it finally did, the problem wasn't that people suddenly became irrational. It was that they became rational all at once. When prices started falling, selling made sense. When credit tightened, pulling back was logical. When banks grew cautious, depositors followed. Each individual action was reasonable. Collectively, they were devastating. Now, fast forward nearly a century. Today's economy looks nothing like the world of 1929 on the surface. We have digital markets, global capital flows, central banks with decades of crisis experience, and economic data updated in real time. We also have new technologies driving productivity and reshaping labor, just as electrification and automobiles once did. Again, none of this is imaginary. Real innovation is happening. But the deeper question is not whether progress is real. It's whether the structure supporting that progress has become overly dependent on confidence behaving in very specific ways. Confidence that liquidity will remain abundant. Confidence that asset prices will be backstopped. Confidence that growth expectations can be revised upward faster than risks are revised downward. Historians debate how predictable the 1929 crash really was. Some argue it was obvious in hindsight, but murky in real time. Others point out that warnings existed, but they didn't sound like alarms because the system hadn't yet taught people how quickly things could unravel. What most agree on is this. The danger wasn't just speculation. It was how incentives, credit, and belief combined to create a system that worked brilliantly right up until it didn't. So when people today say, this time is different, they might be right in the details. The institutions are different. The tools are different. The language is different. But the question worth asking isn't whether history is repeating perfectly. It's whether the same type of quiet warning is being missed again, because it doesn't feel dramatic enough to matter. What if the most important lesson of 1929 isn't about greed or bubbles at all, but about how modern financial systems behave when confidence itself becomes the load-bearing structure? And what happens when that structure starts to creak, not with a bang, but with a barely noticeable shift? That's the warning most people didn't hear in 1929. And it's the one we need to understand if we want to make sense of what might be unfolding as we move deeper into 2026. When you look closely at what actually unraveled after 1929, it becomes clear that the stock market crash was not the disease. It was the symptom. The deeper issue was that the entire economic system had been quietly reorganized around the assumption that confidence would stay intact. Credit, investment, employment, and even government revenues had begun to depend on the idea that tomorrow would look enough like today for contracts to keep working smoothly. In the years before the crash, businesses expanded based on expected demand, not current demand. Households took on installment debt because future wages were assumed to be stable. Banks lent because collateral values were rising. None of these decisions were reckless in isolation. In fact, they were rational responses to the incentives of the time. The problem was that they all leaned on the same fragile pillar, the expectation of continuity. When confidence is strong, this kind of system feels incredibly efficient. Money circulates quickly. Risk feels manageable. Growth feeds more growth. But efficiency has a hidden cost. It reduces slack. There is less room for error because everything is optimized for normal conditions. When something unexpected happens, even something small, the system doesn't bend. It snaps. One of the most misunderstood aspects of 1929 is how quickly behavior changed once prices began to fall. There wasn't a single moment where everyone panicked. There was a sequence of adjustments. Brokers tightened lending terms. Investors sold to reduce exposure. Banks became more selective. Businesses delayed expansion. Each step made sense on its own. But together, they created a feedback loop where caution reinforced caution. Confidence didn't just decline. It reversed direction. Now here's where the warning becomes interesting for today. Modern financial systems are far more sophisticated, but they are also far more interconnected. Asset prices influence retirement funds. Retirement funds influence consumption. Consumption influences corporate earnings. Corporate earnings influence stock prices. Credit markets, equity markets, and real economic activity are tightly woven together. That interconnection can spread stability in good times, but it can also spread stress very quickly when expectations change. Consider how much of today's economic activity depends on financing remaining available at predictable costs. Businesses plan years ahead based on borrowing assumptions. Governments roll over debt expecting steady demand. Households make long-term decisions based on mortgage rates and job security. None of this is inherently dangerous. It becomes dangerous when the system leaves little margin for disappointment. Imagine a business that expands because borrowing is cheap and demand looks strong. The expansion creates jobs, which supports local spending. That spending supports other businesses, which justifies higher valuations in financial markets. Those valuations, in turn, support more lending. Everything looks stable, even healthy. But if financing conditions tighten unexpectedly, the expansion slows. Hiring pauses. Spending softens. Valuations come under pressure. Suddenly, what looked like a self-sustaining cycle reveals how dependent it was on one assumption quietly holding. This is the kind of dynamic economists worried about in the late 1920s, even if they didn't have today's language for it. They weren't predicting the exact trigger. They were worried about sensitivity, about how little it might take to change behavior across the system. The relatable part is that we experience this pattern in everyday life too. Think about personal budgeting. When income feels stable, people commit to long-term expenses. A car payment here, a subscription there, maybe a mortgage that assumes nothing major will change. As long as income continues, everything works. The moment income becomes uncertain, priorities shift fast. Spending that once felt reasonable suddenly feels risky. The same person hasn't changed. The environment has. Financial systems behave similarly, just at a massive scale. Another parallel between 1929 and today is how success itself can mask risk. The long expansion of the 1920s made people less sensitive to warnings because those warnings kept failing to materialize. Each year that passed without disaster reinforced the belief that the system had matured past its vulnerabilities. Stability became proof of permanence. Modern markets have their own version of this. Each successfully managed crisis strengthens confidence in the tools used to manage it. That confidence isn't irrational. Institutions learn. Policies evolve. But there's a subtle shift that can happen where confidence in risk management turns into reliance on it. When people begin to assume that shocks will always be absorbed smoothly, behavior adjusts accordingly. Historians still debate how much agency policymakers in the 1920s really had. Central banking was less developed. Economic data was limited. Responses were slower. Today's policymakers operate with far more information and experience. That matters. But experience can also create blind spots. It can lead to fighting the last crisis more effectively than preparing for a different one. The quiet warning from 1929 wasn't about markets being too high. Markets can be high for good reasons. It was about the system becoming less tolerant of surprise. When everything is priced, planned, and leveraged for a narrow range of outcomes, even modest deviations can have outsized effects. This is why comparisons between eras should never be taken literally. History doesn't repeat in clean cycles. Technologies change. Institutions adapt. But incentives rhyme. And incentives shape behavior in remarkably consistent ways. If confidence is rewarded, people act confident. If leverage is cheap, people use leverage. If stability appears durable, people build on it. None of that is a moral failure. It's human behavior responding to signals. The lesson worth carrying forward is not fear, but awareness. Awareness that systems optimized for efficiency can become fragile. Awareness that confidence is not just a feeling, but a structural component of modern finance. Awareness that when many rational decisions depend on the same assumption, that assumption deserves scrutiny. In 1929, the warning signs were quiet because they didn't look like danger. They looked like success taken a step too far. The same dynamic is what makes similar warnings easy to dismiss in any era. They don't announce themselves as crises. They sound like boring concerns about structure, incentives, and sensitivity. And that's why they're so often ignored. Understanding that doesn't mean predicting disaster. It means recognizing that financial history is less about dramatic collapses and more about how systems behave under changing expectations. The real risk is rarely the shock itself. It's how prepared the system is to absorb it without forcing everyone to change behavior at once. That was true in 1929, and it's a question worth asking anytime confidence starts doing more work than we realize. So here we are at the end of the story, and I want to be careful about what this video is not saying. This is not a prophecy that a crash is guaranteed, or that 1929 is literally replaying itself. History doesn't work like a rerun. The world is different, the institutions are different, the data is different, and the tools policymakers have today are far more advanced than what existed back then. If we try to force a perfect match, we'll learn the wrong lesson. But if we step back and listen to the quieter rhythm underneath the headlines, the real lesson of 1929 starts to sound less like a dramatic warning about greedy speculators, and more like a simple story about incentives, confidence, and fragility. In the late 1920s, the economy wasn't just growing. It was becoming more dependent on confidence, staying smooth and uninterrupted. Credit had to keep rolling. Expectations had to keep rising. Asset prices had to keep behaving. And once the system is built that way, even small shifts can feel bigger than they should because everyone adjusts at the same time. That's the piece I want you to take into 2026, not as fear, but as a lens. Because the most important question isn't, are prices high? Prices can be high for real reasons. The better question is, how much of today's system breaks if confidence gets a little less certain? Not if everyone panics, not if something explodes, just if confidence becomes slightly less generous, slightly more picky, slightly more expensive. What happens if refinancing gets harder? What happens if lenders start caring more about cash flow than growth stories? What happens if consumers, even quietly, decide to buy fewer things because they feel less secure? What happens if businesses slow hiring, not because they're doomed, but because they're cautious? None of that sounds dramatic. That's exactly the point. The biggest shifts often start as reasonable adjustments. And that's why the 1929 warning is so sneaky. It doesn't show up with sirens. It shows up as a system that's optimized so tightly for normal conditions that it struggles with anything outside a narrow lane. Think about how humans behave when life is calm. We schedule everything. We commit to things months ahead. We assume next month will look like this month. And honestly, most of the time, that's a perfectly sensible way to live. But when something changes, maybe your income gets shaky, maybe your expenses jump, maybe you just lose that feeling of certainty, your behavior changes fast. Not because you're irrational, because you're adapting. Markets do the same thing. Entire economies do the same thing. The shift from growth to caution doesn't require drama. It only requires enough people to feel that the old assumptions aren't as safe as they were. So if you're watching 2026 and wondering what matters, it's not just the headlines. It's the incentives underneath them. Who gets rewarded for taking risk right now? Who gets punished for being cautious? Where is the system relying on "it'll probably be fine" to keep moving? And where is it building actual resilience? Real buffers, real savings, real margins of safety. And yes, there are some modern differences that really do matter. Deposit insurance exists. Central banks react faster. Global coordination is more common. Information moves instantly. Those are big stabilizers. But there's also a modern twist that can make fragility feel invisible. When markets and policies work well for a long time, people begin to treat that stability like a permanent feature of reality. The more success you have managing crises, the easier it becomes for everyone to build their plans around the assumption that future crises will also be managed smoothly. That assumption might be right, but if it's wrong even once, the adjustment can be sharp because everyone has been building on the same foundation. Now let me give you one simple way to think about this without getting lost in charts. Ask yourself what the economy is priced for. Not just markets, life. Are businesses priced for steady growth? Are households priced for stable jobs and manageable bills? Are governments priced for steady borrowing costs? Are investors priced for low surprise and quick recoveries? If the whole system is priced for calm, then even a normal amount of turbulence can feel like a storm. And this is where the tone matters. You don't have to be scared to be prepared. You can be curious. You can be calm. You can even be a little amused by how predictable humans are, because we really are predictable. When things go well, we stretch. When uncertainty rises, we pull back. That's not weakness. That's biology with a spreadsheet. So if there's a takeaway tonight, it's this. The 1929 warning isn't a date on a calendar. It's a pattern in behavior. It's the moment a system that looks strong reveals that it was strong partly because confidence was doing the heavy lifting. And now, here's my one controversial statement, and I'm going to say it plainly. The biggest bubble isn't in stocks, housing, or crypto. The biggest bubble is the belief that you can live in a leveraged world without personally carrying any risk. That's the part nobody likes to hear because it's uncomfortable. It's much more satisfying to blame the market or the system or greedy people or bad luck. And yes, systems can be unfair and luck absolutely exists. But risk doesn't disappear just because we don't want it. Risk only moves around. Sometimes it moves onto balance sheets. Sometimes it moves into institutions. Sometimes it moves into policies. And sometimes, quietly, it moves on to ordinary people who didn't even realize they were holding it until the music got softer. So I want to hear from you. Where do you feel the most quiet fragility in your world right now? Is it the cost of living? Job stability? Rent? And housing? Business income? Access to credit? Or is it something less obvious, like how fast confidence changes in your industry when one or two deals fall through? Drop your experience in the comments. Keep it real, keep it human. I read them, and I'll reply and talk it through with you down there, because the most useful finance conversations aren't the ones that sound like textbooks. They're the ones that connect the big patterns to real life. And if this video made you see 1929 a little differently, not as a spooky story, but as a lesson in incentives and structure, then carry that lens with you into 2026. Not to panic, to pay attention, because history doesn't have to repeat for it to teach.